Hello and welcome to BattleTech Faction Briefings. While I normally cover mercenary units, I wanted to change it up this time. So today, we are looking at a house military unit, born in the Lyran Commonwealth, but gaining its fame as a core member of the Kungsarmé, the military branch of the Free Rasalhague Republic. They were disbanded, they were destroyed, and now they serve the Rasalhague Dominion. Today, we are discussing the first tier regiment. Their symbol is a gold Viking helm above a silver star. It is designed to represent the Rasalhague Principality and the Norwegian heritage that many people of that region share. When they were reborn as the first tier assault cluster, their symbol changed into an angry coiled snake on a dark gray shield. This is the symbol of the Rasalhague galaxy and seems to be used by all clusters within that galaxy. They use a dark blue paint scheme, no matter the environment. It does make them look like Lyran units, but considering they began as Lyran units, that makes sense. It seems that they did not change the paint scheme when they were rebuilt, nor when they became the first tier assault cluster. However, they added bands of gold and silver on the shoulders and legs to represent the unity of the Rasalhague Dominion. They also use red runic symbols to represent their kill count. There is a long history for this unit, even though they do not have any major literature I could find. If you want to avoid spoilers, then go to the time listed. During the later part of the Third Succession War, an underground political movement began in the Rasalhague region of space, located between the Draconis Combine and Lyran Commonwealth. This was the Tier Resistance movement. They wanted to end Combine rule over their worlds. To that end, they pushed acts of rebellion and met with representatives of the Lyran Commonwealth. They provided the Commonwealth with intelligence in exchange for support for their cause. The story of the First Tier Regiment begins in 3027 when they were established as part of the LCAF. The unit was made up of Rasalhagian refugees who fled Draconis Combine control of the region, as well as members of the Tier Resistance movement. The unit was designed as an assault weight unit and featured Lyran heavy and assault mechs. Their first victory came during the Fourth Succession War when they were sent to Kirchbach. This was an important mission as Kirchbach was a prefecture capital within the Rasalhague military district. The world was protected by the 17th Rasalhague Regulars, as well as parts of the 5th Amphibian Light Assault Group and Helmut's Hermits. The Lyran sent in the First Tier Regiment, along with the 4th Donegal Guards, 3rd Lyran Regulars, and Winfield's Brigade. The First Tier defeated the 17th Rasalhague Regulars and caused the locals to rise up against the DCMS forces. This caused the Combine forces to give up and retreat. However, General Kelly Benzinger, the commander of the 17th, committed seppuku instead of fleeing the planet. The victory on Kirchbach inspired other Rasalhague rebels to rise up against the Draconis Combine. By 3029, the Lyrans would invite the leaders of the Rasalhague independence movement to Tamar. They were convinced to work with the Lyrans, and together they tried to liberate as many of the Rasalhague region worlds as they could. Even after the war ended, the Rasalhague rebels continued to fight. In 3030, after the end of the Fourth Succession War, Comstar Primus Waterly made an offer to Coordinator Takashi Karita to give independence to the Rasalhague worlds in exchange for new Star League-era battle mechs. Karita rejected the offer, and Waterly then went and asked Takashi's son, Theodore Karita. The deal was sweetened by adding Comstar ROM intelligence, preferred rates for the HPG, better mercenary contracts, and Comguard soldiers posted on the border. Theodore Karita accepted the offer. The Rasalhague region was ignored by the DCMS forces as they received their payment from Comstar. The Combine let the independence movement move forward and would recognize the Free Rasalhague Republic as an independent state in 3034. This also forced Katrina Steiner to give up several worlds that belonged to the Rasalhague region. While the governments of both the Federated Commonwealth and the Draconis Combine recognized Rasalhague, not everyone was happy with this transition of power. The former warlord of the region, Marcus Karita, and forces loyal to him started a revolt. They were declared Ronin by Takashi Karita, and this began the Ronin War. Marcus Carita's forces battled against Republic forces alongside Theodore Carita and his loyalist forces. The 1st Tier Regiment was set as a garrison force on Rasalhague at the time. The infantry assets went after former Rasalhague warlord Marcus Carita. They captured him, but were confronted by the armor of the 8th Rasalhague regulars. The 12th Sun Zong Academy cadre was called in to assist the Tier infantry. However, the 12th sided with the Ronin and attacked. The attack of the 12th destroyed a fuel truck that led to 7 civilian casualties and the destruction of the staging area for the announcement of the formation of the Free Rasalhague Republic. The 1st Tier mech forces arrived to counterattack. The 12th was shattered and fled alongside the 8th Rasalhague regulars, but Marcus Carita escaped alongside his Ronin troops. The 1st Tier chased them to the spaceport. One of the dropships got damaged and some of the enemy forces fled into the wilderness. The fleeing forces split up, with one group attempting to steal a Mule-class dropship, but were found and were surrounded by Tier battle mechs. This group surrendered, with some committing seppuku and others being sent to Luthien for trial. One of the teams that was made up of 8th regulars decided to attack the capital. They were spotted by police, and heavy mechs from the 1st Tier took down the remaining mechs and armor of the enemy group. The last of the 3 groups was hunted down in the forest and systematically destroyed. After that, the 1st Tier began pursuit of the enemies that fled to Predlitz. However, their heavy and assault mechs had trouble keeping up with the lighter units of the 8th Rasalhague regulars and the 12th Sun Zang. After 3 weeks of fighting, the 2nd Sword of Light arrived to assist the 1st Tier. They had some difficulties facing the combined enemy threat, and had to withdraw to better coordinate an attack against the Ronin. The 2nd Sword got some of their troops behind enemy lines and drove the Ronin into an ambush. The Tier forces used artillery to push their enemies directly into the firing lines of their battle mechs. The Bravo Company of Tier's 2nd Battalion took out 2 companies of enemy mechs. This attack nearly wiped out the 12th Sun Zang. During salvage and mop-up operations, they learned that the few remaining enemy forces had fled to the moon of Predlitz. When relief forces arrived, in the form of the 2nd Drakon, the 1st Tier went to the moon to finish off their enemies. After that, the unit went to Radstadt, with a few elements of the regiment going off to assist on other fronts. Part of their forces went to Gunsberg and faced off with the 211th Mechanized Assault Armor Regiment. The fighting was fierce, and the Tier's XO, Tor Miraborg, was heavily wounded in an ambush that took out his lance. The anti-Ronin forces took such heavy losses that the attached mercenary unit, Dragon's Breath, used a clause in their contract to leave if they took too much damage. The main force moved on to Radstadt to assist the 1st Cavalry. The Cavalry had been fighting elements of the 603rd Tank and 49th Mechanized Tank regiments for months. The mercenaries hired to garrison the world, Vincent's vigilantes, ended up not getting involved during the Ronin attacks, making the battle go on longer than it really should have. The 1st Tier came in and cleared out the remaining Ronin forces. When the Ronin War came to an end, the 1st Tier regiment was decommissioned. The officers were either given command of other units or entered into the Republic government. The clan invasion was devastating to the Free Rasalhague Republic. They lost the majority of their worlds, and by 3052, they were left with only one province made up of 7 worlds. Thus, there was a need to bring back the elite forces of the 1st Tier regiment. Their former commander, Christian Mansdwater, became the commander of the Rasalhague military and had the power to create a new version of the unit. This time, they were made up of a battalion of assault mechs with 3 support formations, but their numbers did not make a full regiment. To make the unit more impressive, it was armed with several captured clan omnimechs. As the leader of the Kongsarmee, Christian Mansdwater asked Overste Rhett Weaver to take command of the rebuilt 1st Tier. However, he refused and remained in command of the 2nd Freeman. Thus, command went to Mansdwater's son, which was a controversial choice. Despite protests of nepotism, Hansen Mansdwater took command and changed the tactics of the 1st Tier to match their new formation. His approach was a more defensive one and used flanking maneuvers to defeat their enemies. His skill at leading the first tier helped remove his reputation of being a Nepo baby. By 3062, they were made up of 2 battalions of assault battle mechs, with a wing of fighters, a battalion of armor, and a battalion of infantry. The unit was slow to build up due to pilots needing to be of elite skill level to join. Despite smaller numbers than before, they had gained fame as a skilled unit due to successfully raiding clan territory on several occasions. The unit was stationed on Orestes, the new Rasalhague capital, due to the clan invasion. The Janisek Industries factory on Orestes helped them add advanced equipment into their arsenal. They also acquired standard inner sphere battle armor for their infantry. Of note, the infantry also worked as bodyguards for Hansen Mansdwater, who was the son of the nation's ruler. In November 3068, the world of Orestes was attacked by the Word of Blake. The first tier was teamed up with the 104th Division of Comstar. The Blakists arrived with a warship, a division, and mercenary backup. While the Blakists were driven off, the defenders were broken and nearly destroyed by a parting warship bombardment. During the madness of the Word of Blake War, Clan Ghostbear moved in and captured the remaining Free Rasalhague Republic worlds. On Orestes, in 3070, political discussions started with Clan Ghostbear. The clanners were welcomed and the Rasalhague Dominion was finally formed. As a means of trying to bring the people together, the Ghostbear leadership created new clusters which were partially made up of shattered Rasalhague units. The first tier assault cluster was established in 3074. Once again, they were an assault weight unit. Their christening was attended by elected Prince Ragnar and Ghost Bear Khan Alethea Kabrinsky. The first tier became part of the frontline forces of the Rasalhague Galaxy. However, in 3076, the Rasalhague Dominion was dealing with issues stemming from former Kungsarmé soldiers who didn't want to participate in the trials of position. The first tier were sent to Trondheim to meet with members of the Second Freemen. Their discussion broke down into fistfights and led into fighting in the streets. By the end of the fighting, there were only 6 Freeman mech warriors remaining. After the fighting, the first tier were set on Grumium in 3079. They were only at 75% effective, and nearly 3/4 of their unit were made up of Omnimechs. Their rebuilding was aided by Grumium Creations, who had been seeking a means to upgrade their production facilities. In 3085, the unit was stationed on Trondheim, a world that was shared by Clan Ghostbear and Clan Diamond Shark, which would later be Clan Sea Fox. They were at 80% effectiveness with 74% Omnimechs. The rebuilding of the unit was made easier due to the amount of on-world industry. In 3098, they endured a savage attack by Karita forces. By 3100, the first tier were still on Trondheim, holding the line during the Second Combine Dominion War. They defended the world alongside other Ghostbear units against the 11th Ghost and 5th Sword of Light with warship backup. The battle marked the destruction of the second Rasalhague Bears because the first tier did not arrive in time to give them the support they needed. The first tier had to use a hide-and-seek strategy where they kept moving between the world and its 4 moons to buy time for reinforcements to arrive to stop the Draconis Combine forces. After the end of the Second Combine Dominion War, the first tier gained their first expansion with the creation of the second tier assault cluster. The second would see their first major action in the early 3110s. With the establishment of the Rasalhague Dominion, a rebellion organization called Motstand was created to fight against Clan Ghostbear. The second earned quite a bit of fame for fighting against them, especially for their destruction of the first Snafanar, which was a major blow to the rebellion movement. The first tier were sent to any front that was under threat during the Dark Age. They were in former Republic of the Sphere territory in 3135. They quickly secured several worlds for the Dominion as the Republic started to fall apart. However, when Clan Wolf left their occupation zone in 3137, the Rasalhague Galaxy was moved from Republic territory to former Wolf territory to take as many worlds as possible. Clan Hell's Horses moved in first and took several worlds. The first tier were sent from world to world in order to hold off any probes by Hell's horses. The second tier attacked Karsten. They faced off with the 9th and 10th Horde clusters of Clan Hell's horses. They were eventually pushed off world, and the planet was taken by the Dominion. In 3145, the first tier assault cluster was stationed on Memmingen at 80% effective, with 73% of their forces being made up of Omnimechs. During their time garrisoning the world, they easily held off a Hell's Horses raid. As for the second tier, they became the personal command of Galaxy Commander Ingvild Magnusson, the commander of the Rasalhague Galaxy. It is unclear what became of the first and second tier during the Ghost Bear Civil War. It is easy to assume that they sided with the government and helped bring a swift victory to the conflict. Now they are probably rebuilding before heading out into Draconis Combine territory to fight yet another Combine Dominion war. That's my best guess, because vague history is vague. While many units that have a long history don't change that much over the years, yet the first tier has gone from a team of rebels working with the Lyrans to one of the core members of the Rasalhague Galaxy. The Rasalhague Dominion stands strong, and there will be more stories of the first tier in the future, and more victories will surely be on the horizon. There are some interesting pilots amongst the tier regiment. Sadly, there isn't much information for the star colonels who led the first tier assault cluster. Christian Mansdwater. An officer in the LCAF, he would become the first commander of the first tier. As years passed, he would become the leader of the Rasalhague military and would become a First Lord of the Star League. He was assassinated in 3078 by a terrorist. His personal mech is unknown. Tor Miraborg, the second in command of the tier in the early days, and heavily wounded in the Ronin War. He later became the commander of the Radstadt province. He holds a grudge against mercenaries because the Dragon's Breath abandoned their post. He piloted a Grasshopper. Susan Plante, a company commander during the Ronin War whose strategies helped finish off the 12th Sun Zhang cadre. She remained with the first tier through the 3060s as the leader of the 1st Orestes Lancers. Her battle mech is unknown. Hansen Mansdwater, the son of Christian Mansdwater, who took command of the unit in 3062. He fought fiercely to end the idea that he was only in his position due to nepotism. He gained fame by fighting against the clans and winning. He used a ZEU-7S Zeus, then later in his career he used an AS-7S Atlas with a tag system to coordinate his troops. Building a force of the first tier regiment can be a little complicated as they evolved over the years. When they were developed in 3027, the unit was made up of heavy and assault class Lyran mechs. The group would gain a large amount of Draconis Combine mechs once the Republic was established. Then, in their rebirth time period, they would have a good amount of Omni-mechs. Then, their final form, in 3067, they were 3/4 Omni-mech, mostly of the Ghost Bear variety. This does provide plenty of options for building this unit. Depending on the era you prefer, you can adjust the amount of Omni-mechs for your forces. It should also be noted that the first tier did have armor, infantry, and artillery backup, as well as Omni-fighters for air superiority. The infantry would also get battle armor in the later clan invasion era. As for tactics, they eventually developed a defensive style that drew in enemies before flanking them with faster mechs and armor support. While this is difficult to replicate on the tabletop, it might work for an Alpha Strike game. There are plenty of novels and short stories that take place in the Rasalhague region, but none of them tie into the first tier regiment in depth. However, there are plenty of great sourcebook entries that cover the units, especially during the Faza era, and in the Catalyst era too, I guess. With most videos, I cover a unit I know something about, or I stumbled across while researching a different unit. However, this time around, I just wanted to do something different. So I did a Rasalhague unit. I decided on the first tier because they sounded more interesting and some of the other units due to their role in the Free Rasalhague Republic and Rasalhague Dominion. I've always found the Free Rasalhague Republic interesting, and I'm glad I got to do a deep dive into some of its lore. You can tell that FASA put quite a bit of effort into making their history make sense and serve a purpose to the overall story of the universe. Then Catalyst gave us the Rasalhague Dominion, and then after that, Anyhow, I generally like this unit. I am very close to painting up a set of first tier. I'm just not sure if I want to add the stripes to make them the Assault Cluster version. If you like Rasalhague, this is one of the more fun choices because you get to mix Lyran, Combine, and Ghost Bear mechs to make your force. I would love to see a first tier regiment or Assault Cluster force pack. It will likely never happen, but if it does, here are my suggestions. Alongside cards for Hansen Mansdwater, Tor Miraborg, and Christian Mansdwater. Oh, and Star Colonel Espin, because why not? Next time, I will be going back to mercenary units. After that, I'll be getting ready for my secret summer project, so here's another clue. They appear in many different entries of the fiction. A big thank you to all my subscribers. My channel keeps growing because of you. May your weapons stay hot and your reactors stay cool. Until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.